Welcome to Man in America, a voice of reason in a world gone mad. I'm your host, Seth Holhouse. Well, first off, as you can tell, I'm still getting better. I feel great, but my voice is obviously not what it should be, so I guess I'm a little bit raspy today, and that's just part of the show. So, diving into today's topic, for those of us that have been following, I guess really since 2020 or even 2016, what's been happening with President Trump and the treasonous acts that have been held against him. We have the Steele dossier, the Russia hoax, the laptop from hell, the 2020 election, and everything that happened there. And the list just goes on and on and on. And if there's one thing that I think I've wanted, and you probably have wanted, it's just justice. Like, I don't want to take people that are not guilty and do bad things to them, but I want to take people and that have harmed our country, that were kind of part of a communist coup, an overthrow of our government. And look what happened with under the 4 years of Biden. Look what happened. Look at the political persecution that Trump suffered during his first term. Obviously, he's continued to suffer that. But the first term, the Russia hoax. I mean, the deep state had lined up all the cards against him, and he still made it through. But what's so interesting is that right now we've got Tulsi Gabbard coming out talking about this. We have Trump even talking about it. It appears like the DOJ is actually building a case against Obama and Hillary and a lot of the other people that were involved in these, what you would say, acts of treason. And so the questions I have, excuse me for being a little jaded, but are we actually going to see justice, or is it going to be another thing where, like, the Epstein files or whatever it is, where we're like, yes, this is going to happen, it's going to happen, and look, Trump put a meme out about it, it must happen, and then nothing happens? Or is it actually going to be something that is legitimately taken seriously, and we'll see some high-level arrests potentially? I mean, it seems like that's pointing towards that. And so joining me today is my good friend Mel K to help us make sense of this. Now, what I appreciate about Mel's perspective is that she doesn't just look at this situation in this small little window, this small slice. She's looking at, okay, how do the actions of Obama and Hillary and the people surrounding them, Victoria Nuland, Eric Holder, how do their actions fit into the much larger plan to overthrow and destroy America? And you can trace it back, as we're going to get into in the interview today, back to things that were happening in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, where these plans were being laid as we eventually got to the point of the 16-year plan of the 8 years of Obama, 8 years of Hillary. And so we're going to be talking about just what's really going on. Are we going to see justice? But also importantly, what we're going to be talking about is that the plan that they were part of was a plan that was leading this country into some sort of global government. As we'll go over George Soros' own words, talking about this new world order. And this new world order will be built upon track and trace technology and technocracy. So in addition to talking about, Trump and Obama and Hillary, et cetera, we're also going to be talking about this idea of the new world order and this global surveillance state, and ask the questions of, with Trump and everything that he's doing with AI and big data and Silicon Valley and companies like Palantir, is he perhaps unintentionally or even intentionally laying the groundwork for some sort of technocratic society? We have to be asking these questions. So obviously we're going to be covering a lot of great information. I hope you enjoy the interview with my good friend Mel K. You probably think your 401k is safe, that it's growing, that it'll be enough for your... Mel, it's so good to have you back on. It's been quite some time, but I always enjoy our conversation. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Me too. I mean, I look back over the last several years, and every time that we've interacted, it's kind of like, okay, the coast is clear. We can actually talk and communicate and outside of the bubble. So it's always such a pleasure seeing you. We've been on this journey together, and it's only getting wilder.
It is. I mean, it's actually getting really crazy. I mean, today I wanted to look at just the intersection of a lot that's happening, especially as it relates to the former administrations, right? Obama, Hillary. Biden seems a little more out of the picture now, except for Hunter giving these weird interviews, getting excited about crack cocaine, that's a whole different story. But looking at, I guess we'll start with this. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard has been dropping some bombs, really. This is a Gateway Pundit article says, Tulsi Gabbard suggests Obama may be guilty of treason. Quote, the expressed intent of what followed afterward can only be described as a years-long coup and treasonous conspiracy. So here you have a very prominent person, obviously in our intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, when the mention of treason, treason isn't a word that you casually mention. Treason is like one of the highest crimes, right? Someone could be committed of, and a former president, especially, it's absolutely incredible. So I know that you've covered not just American politics. To me, I think American politics as it is more of a kabuki theater. But you've covered really the deep state of the American politics in depth. And so when you see this and you see Gabbard out here talking about this, how do you make sense of that?
Well, what I think we're dealing with, honestly, is infiltration, a JFK infiltration instead of invasion. But frankly, I believe a lot of what we're dealing with is that between the years of 1944 and 1954, when they created all the international institutions, and then we got all the international banking cartel involved, and the UN, the IMF, the World Bank, a lot of things. And then also in 47, they passed the International Organization Immunity Act. So a lot of these institutions that I believe function above our governments and have basically captured our nation, but most of the nations in the West really are the same people that have done this since before World War I. I think the push to World War III was always in the cards. I also think that a lot of this goes back to the Rockefeller, Brzezinski, Kissinger model that they were pushing for of a regional governance or global governance cut into regions. Also, the Third Reich, we have to remember that their end goal was basically to control the world through a unified Europe with no Russia. And you can even read that in Brzezinski's books or in any of the Kissinger documents that came out about world government and the need for that, or even Rockefeller himself, who said the future would be run by basically internationalist intellectuals and elite intellectuals and bankers. Back in his memoir, he even mentioned that again. So I think what we're dealing with are decades of deception on the people of the United States of America, particularly post-World War II. I think probably trillions of dollars of U.S. taxpayer money has been funneled through things like USAID, which is not aid, it's international development, but international development for what? And for me, I think it all lines up. And then you got National Endowment for Democracy. Also, the State Department has been completely reconfigured to be, I believe, a globalist State Department, not really focused on what's best for America for now, decade upon decade. I think when George H.W. Bush walked on the floor of the United Nations and announced that there would be a new world order run by the United Nations. Not only did he mean it, but I also believe that the investments were made towards that. Then we had, of course, Reid and Pelosi back Obama rather than Hillary Clinton back in 2008. We're in the middle of, I believe, a purposeful controlled demolition of the financial system where they were going towards a one world financial model, which is, of course, what it's all about, in my opinion. And they signed on to that. And in 2015, Barack Obama, without the consent of the governed or explaining that it was a nation state ending project, Agenda 2030, that involved a full track and trace surveillance of all human beings, animals, plants, insects, whatever, but also all natural resources, all money, all, pharmaceutical, everything in the hands of a very small what I call the global public-private partnership and their international banking cartel partners, I believe that the chips were in for the Bush, Clinton, Obama, and I guess Biden world order to kick it off. I think Trump came in. I don't think the attacks against Trump, starting with the coup and the color revolution that kicked off simultaneously when Trump unexpectedly won in 2016, are about Donald Trump. I think they are about the trillions of dollars have been invested in this model that they've been working towards since World War II. I don't believe that the Crown ever accepted the American Revolution the way that we think they did. They planned and came in and infiltrated, again, with the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, all the international bankers that were involved in the Federal Reserve, which Wilson pushed through, I believe, on the eve of Christmas that year that it came to be. And I think this was a long game, basically, to end nation states. And the one problem, as I say all the time, Trump would say in his first term, and I agree with it in his first term, they're not after me, they're after you, I'm in the way. I believe, though, the bigger picture is they're not after America, they're after the world. And the American Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the founding documents, what George Washington left and wrote in his farewell address, that's what's in the way. And this controlled demolition of America, I believe, was supposed to be a 16-year plan. Obama pops in. They decimate the financial system. They tighten it up. They have all the players there from Goldman and from BlackRock that go in and out of the government that are really part, to me, of a type of parent company that has captured our entire political system over decades. And here's Trump starting to dismantle it. Unacceptable. And I think by any means necessary. Right when Trump won, George Soros, who I believe to be more of a front for the entire banking cartel, George Soros announced, we're going to get Trump out of there as soon as possible. We're not going to let him take his term. And then don't forget, all during Obama was the prep, I believe, for World War III, which was to destroy what is left of what Russia became after the USSR fell, after NATO was supposed to be dismantled, which I believe NATO to be an offensive force, to be the military of the EU and the international organizations and the international banking cartel, and not something protecting Europe for good. No, it's protecting to what I call the Fourth Reich. I don't see how you can't call it that when you look at the money flow since 1944 out of Germany into Switzerland, into Argentina, and into America, which, oddly enough, Chuck Grassley is full in investigation right now on that front, investigating Credit Suisse and the Nazi rat lines. That is an investigation that's supposed to, from what the people are saying at UBS who bought Credit Suisse, that when that report comes out in 2026, our entire understanding of World War II and post-World War II America and the world will be very different. And so for me, I just think that Trump got in the way of a long-term plan to end nation states. And then when Trump won, they were just not going to allow him, to have any detente with Russia. They were not going to allow him to look into what was going on in Ukraine since John McCain and Nuland and Obama and the rest of them overthrow the duly elected government, put in all these CIA bases and labs in Ukraine on the border, kept expanding NATO. I mean, this was a march towards, I believe, the Fourth Reich. So, and to say Reich, people think Nazis. No. There was a goal to run the world through a centralized hub in Europe, Brussels, or something between Brussels and Switzerland. And there's plenty of documentation that from 44 on, the people that were complicit in that started planning for this. And frankly, that's what I think more than anything else, the controlled demolition of America, the color revolution that Obama and his friends kicked off, and frankly, the attack to destroy MAGA, more than Trump, to destroy MAGA, to destroy the populist movement, because their new thing now is fighting autocracy. All they mean is the institutions of the state. Autocracy, because they say that about Hungary, they say that about anywhere that is rejecting the global governance model of Agenda 2030 and the international banking system. Right now is supposedly an autocracy, and all the other countries are supposedly democracy. If we think that our country right now is functioning as a representative democracy or a constitutional republic as it was founded. It's not even close to that. And that is because I believe through years and years of grooming and particularly the bloodline families of the original banking families, and then the grooming through private schools and select schools that then funnel into the Ivy League, or as I call it, the poison Ivy League, then funnel out of the Ivy League, because it used to be that, the inventors and the doctors and all of that went to Harvard and Yale and Columbia. But that's not what happened after the infiltration post-World War II. What I believe happened is that they were grooming them to put them into NGOs, into international non-government organizations that all somehow in 47 got immunity, including the UN and the Bank of International Settlements and the World Bank. So to me, what became the model of the Ivy Leagues was to funnel them into the NGOs, international organizations, multinational banks and corporations to actually pull off the global governance model in plain sight. And as Trump started dismantling things in the first term, such as the awful, completely corrupt and completely, I believe, controlling our teachers unions, the UNESCO, then he pulls out of the Paris Climate Accord because, of course, that's based on Rockefeller's Club of Rome, limits to growth, human-caused climate change, all can be debunked easily. But the whole model was to convince the world, particularly American children, over 3 generations, that nation states, particularly the United States of America, to be proud of our country, to have sovereignty, borders, have one language, one culture, shared values, principles, was the biggest problem to achieving the end goal, which is, I believe, totalitarian technocratic control that's somewhat like a little bit like communism, a little bit like socialism, but with algorithms and with data being the tools of the control grid and the building the global public infrastructure. And what I believe happened is that Obama was picked in there by Pelosi and Reid, who were all in on it, obviously well invested in the global public-private partnership. And I think Obama's past really has to be looked at. His mother and both fathers' relationships with USAID and the CIA. I frankly think the USAID, National Endowment for Democracy, the State Department, and the CIA all worked together post-World War II to create the environment that Brzezinski talked about in his books, that, Kissinger made speeches at the Council of Foreign Relations and Chatham House about, the Trilateral Commission's whole reason for being. A lot of these groups, literally, their whole end be all end all has not changed. And what I think really happened is they did not believe Trump was going to win until that day. And we now know that neither did Russia. So it made the whole thing. But bigger than that, I don't think that they could allow Trump to interact with Russia while he was president, to have detente, to have open dialogue with Russia particularly, but also with Ukraine or the EU, because I believe all this time they were planning on destroying Russia once and for all, as Brzezinski wrote in his own book, to run the world as a united Europe, no Russia, out of Brussels, with this international finance being the key to a global interoperable ID system that everyone had to have birth to death. You see them, they're going around, Africa, South America, everywhere there's poor people, they're handing out phones, they're doing all this like it's nice. It's not nice, just like Bill Gates and Common Core and giving out computers. It was for control so that there's one narrative. So I do believe that the real crimes that we're talking about, sedition and treason, and those happened between the transition from Trump winning in 2016 to him taking office. And then after that, they had already set up to sabotage his entire first term by putting a wall between Trump and the foreign policy of Bush, Clinton, Obama that led up to Trump, and making sure that he couldn't dismantle the plans for a great third world war, which of course all these people, the same bloodlines, the same people, have used every war to have reconstruction after, which was a tremendous amount, trillions of dollars involved, already invested into this. Trump was costing the multinational corporations trillions of dollars by just pulling out of the climate accords. And I just really think that it was all about he's getting in the way of a plan that they really didn't want us to know. And then I am of the mind that the pandemic was 100% purposeful. I look at Larry Fink, who was on the board of the Council of Foreign Relations, the architect of the Great Reset, the ESG score, social credit score, and his talk in Jackson Hole shortly before the pandemic was unleashed. Then all the rules changes to the election, the Transition Integrity Project. If you look through that document, it's a document saying we will not let Trump win no matter what. Here's the scenarios. Here's how we fight it. Here's what we do. And then, of course, they had to set up an fedsurrection, to make sure he could never run again. Then when that failed, they did 4 years of lawfare. It didn't work. And now we're at a situation where the American people have to accept the truth about post-World War II America, and that we have been to the tune of trillions of dollars going missing. We have been funding regime change. We have been funding invasions that we're not even told about. We've been funding funny money stuff through the IMF and the World Bank. The American taxpayers have been looted, particularly because the German Marshall Fund was the biggest fraud. It built the EU. It allowed the euro, the one world currency that was the plan, to come into being. So I think we're at a place where first step for our country is to realize this isn't about Trump. It's not even about our government. It's really about, essential reasoning for the whole United States project, which is individual liberty, personal sovereignty, autodetermination, unalienable rights by God, and a country that has two giant oceans on both sides that shouldn't be involved in military conflict all over the world. And when you look at it, all three wars, but going back to World War, frankly, the French Revolution, the same international bankers have paid for both sides every time, and they're the only ones that benefit after. So I think World War III, that they are pushing towards now, the EU full steam ahead. They have destroyed the nations inside the EU, particularly their sovereignty and wealth and industry, like they've done here. And I think that's where we are, is that the entire inner circle of Obama had to, by any means necessary, make sure that Trump was blind, deaf, and dumb to all the crimes they had committed to set up this moving target, all the way back to, Clinton and the Kyoto Treaty, just kicking off the global climate crisis, everything global pandemic, pushing the globalism in the schools, all of that. So I think we had 3 generations of children in America that were, post Operation Paperclip, dumbed down and taught upside down history, not taught about communism or socialism. Certainly when I found out that the Annenberg Foundation had given Bill Ayers and a community organizer named Barack Obama $50 million to write a new curriculum for America before he even became a senator. So, to me, I think Obama's always been an operative, a straight-up Manchurian candidate, frankly, to usher in the end of America. And then Hillary Clinton was supposed to step in there. And the coup de grace, I believe they still would have launched probably the pandemic when they did, in any case. But once Trump came in, they had to do it, I think, for that election. And, the biggest problem is that the American people either don't want to see it, can't see it, or are still not clear that the intelligence agencies run the fake news media. And post Obama with the Smith-Mundt Act, I believe that a lot of the people in the media are actually, and a lot of the lawyers doing lawfare, a lot of the people we see in embassies were CIA trained and then moved into these positions. And the CIA, I believe, to be the biggest fraud on the people, because I think they always worked for the international bankers. If you look at where Allen Dulles was during World War II, and that the guy running the Bank of International Settlements, that they were funding all the money out of Germany before Hitler surrendered, was also an American at the Bank of International Settlements, McKittrick. I think we are dealing with a level of fraud and deception on the people of the United States that is almost impossible to believe, but I fully believe is true. And by any means necessary, the deep state that put in Obama were okay and gathered around to make sure that Donald Trump could not do anything or do as little as possible to get them off track to achieve Agenda 2030.
There's a lot to unpack there. Pardon me. There's two things you mentioned that I want to get your thoughts on. You mentioned track and trace surveillance, which if you look at what they would need to have a global security state, a global technocracy, they would need to have technology keeping people in line, a global digital ID, a global social credit score, et cetera. So you mentioned track and trace and you mentioned technocracy, right? And so
Right.
Now looking at what's happened under Trump since he got in, even though he's been opposing, obviously, a lot of the globalist agendas and pulling out a lot of the international treaties and organizations, and you've got RFK Jr. coming out recently and saying, "Look, we're rejecting these updates and the WHO treaties, right? We're not going to be pulling into that. We're not going to be sacrificing our own constitutional rights for the global medical safety of people." But at the same time, if you look in and you kind of trace things back with Palantir, with all of these big tech executives kind of magically overnight becoming pro-Trump, standing beside him, front row at his inauguration, et cetera. You look at the big contracts being, handed out to Palantir. You look at the Genius Act. You look at the big, beautiful bill limiting states' ability to make any rules or pass any regulation on AI for the next 10 years, which to me is one of the most frightening examples of just shredding the Constitution, which is supposed to take the power and push it down. But if that then limits the state, at the state level, the ability to regulate AI, because what if they roll out some sort of kind of Palantir social credit system in America, and what if Ron DeSantis says, what, hey, not in my state, and they say, well, sorry, right, because we've already passed this, and you can't make that decision. So when you look at the role that Trump has played with the advancement of AI, all the announcements for massive data centers, even like what was it, day 2, bringing up Ellison and Sam Altman and front and center talking about these massive AI, Project Stargate and everything. It seems almost like if I'm looking at it objectively, and I want to be optimistic, that it's kind of like you have the bad guy over here, and it's just this kind of bait and switch where, while Trump is doing a lot of great things, are you concerned that maybe he's also laying what could be the groundwork for technocracy? And if you look at what Elon Musk has done, okay, thank you, Elon. I can, we can publish this on Twitter without any concern, which I love that. However, you look at his past, his grandfather's role with the Tetracratic Party in Canada, and you look at some of the things that he's talked about, his legions of Optimus robots, frightening to me.
Me too.
Does that all, how do you make sense of all that? Because I feel like it's like, okay, there's an enemy over here. Does that mean this guy's the good guy? But then, I'm seeing whatever the intentions, even if it's the best of intentions, like the road to hell is paved in good intentions, right? So, how do you kind of make sense of all these things together? If you want to drop extra pounds, boost energy levels, or